Hello and welcome to the first video in the cryptocurrency explanation series. In this series I'm going to explain you what the purpose of certain cryptocurrencies are and how they work. All of this in a way that you can tell to your friends to get them enthusiastic about cryptocurrencies. Before I start this video I want to ask you a favor, since these videos take tremendously longer to make than my traditional price analysis videos. Therefore please drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you aren't subscribed already. Let's get started. Today it's time for the big boss of all cryptocurrencies, namely Bitcoin. When we talk about Bitcoin, we often relate it to how much dollars it's worth right now, but what Bitcoin actually represents is hard to grasp since it's kind of untouchable. When we ask friends about Bitcoin or when we go on the internet, these are most probably the answers you would get. Some people say it's digital gold, which points to the fact that most people see Bitcoin as a stored value, just like gold, but it doesn't really tell what Bitcoin itself is. Some people say it's a method to send money across the internet, which is technically true, but it's fundamentally different than your well-known payment providers such as PayPal, Alipay, Skrill, Square, etc. Other people say it's a peer-to-peer payment network and it's already getting closer to the truth, but it leaves out some fundamental properties of Bitcoin. And at last, some people say it's a decentralized payment network, which is actually 100% correct, and this would be the best three-word description of what Bitcoin is. But after hearing decentralized payment network, do you really know what Bitcoin is in essence? You only know what it's good for. And what does decentralized really mean? Well, don't worry too much, we will get into it. First, let's get down to the essence of Bitcoin. And in essence, Bitcoin is actually really simple. Bitcoin is nothing other than a ledger that tracks how much balance everyone has. You can literally see it as a piece of paper that has names and balances written on them. Nothing more. So it's not like a digital piece of code that you own or something else. Bitcoin in itself, the Bitcoin network, is nothing else than a list of people with certain balances. And you might find this weird since it's not something physical or touchable, or it's just a number. But it's much of what we already have in central banking. Right now, most people pay with their credit or debit cards, and your money on your bank is nothing but a number that the bank keeps track of. So if we think about it, the central bank pretty much is also a list of balances. For example, if John sends $20 to Chris, there isn't actually a physical handover of the money. The bank will just update their account numbers to make sure all the balances are correct, and that John has $180 now and Chris now has $20 more. So now that we have made the comparison, we can ask the valid question, isn't Bitcoin the same as banks? Well, no, fundamentally they are very different. And let's dive deeper into Bitcoin and explaining the differences with actual banks. Well, we said that in essence Bitcoin is very simple, but now let's go a bit deeper into reality. In reality, Bitcoin's ledger doesn't exist of balances measured in dollars, but the Bitcoin ledger has its own currency. And you guessed it right, it's actually Bitcoin. So here we see an updated list of balances. Here we see that John has 2 Bitcoins, Bob has half a Bitcoin, Chris has 5.63 Bitcoin, and Dave has 1.001 Bitcoin. Well, to preserve privacy, the Bitcoin ledger doesn't keep a list of names as we see here. It actually keeps a list of unique addresses, which looks like this. Each of these addresses are belonging to John, Bob, Chris, and Dave that we have just seen in the previous slide. However, their name is not stated on the sheet. So, how do you own an address? Well, you own an address by having the password to that address. And in Bitcoin, we call that password a private key. For example, here the top address belongs to John, since John only knows the private key of the address and no one else. Since no one else has his private key, no one else has access to his funds. Well, now we know what the ledger looks like, but how can you be part of the ledger? How do you get Bitcoin? How do you get to be like John, Bob, Chris, or Dave? Well, let's say Alice wants to join the ledger and she wants to make an address. She makes a new address, and obviously her balance at the beginning is 0 Bitcoin, as seen at the bottom of the sheet. Alice asks John whether she could buy some of his Bitcoin in exchange for something else. This can obviously be anything. John can gift the 1 Bitcoin to her, but maybe in return she can give a product or a service or another currency like dollars. Well, John and Alice came to an agreement and John sends her 1 Bitcoin. And now the ledger gets updated such that 1 Bitcoin gets removed from John and gets added to Alice's balance. This is something similar to what we have seen in banking. However, now we don't use dollars, but now we use Bitcoins. Well, this sounds simple enough, but how does such a transaction take place? Normally in the case of banks, we would have the bank take care of our balances, right? So, who owns this ledger? How do transactions take place? Who owns this ledger? And that's where the power of Bitcoin starts. And the answer is everyone. Anyone who wants can ask for a copy of the ledger to see all balances together with all addresses. And everyone can choose to contribute to the Bitcoin network. So what does contributing to the network really mean? Before I continue, I have to state that this is where we start oversimplifying the process of contributing to the Bitcoin network, since this is a highly technical process. If you're interested in this technical process, I advise you to watch another technical Bitcoin video after watching this video. Alright, let's continue. Now let's say that these 4 users contribute to the Bitcoin network. What does this mean? Well, if the ledger is static, there wasn't much to contribute. All the balances are the same, nothing has to change, so there's nothing to contribute. So let's ask for a change in the ledger. We'll use a transaction which we are already familiar with. Namely, we request that John transfers 1 Bitcoin to Alice. Attached to this request is a digital signature that shows that John approves this transfer and that he is in possession of the private key. Don't worry, when you do a transaction, you are not giving your own private key to the public, but using mathematics you can show you own the private key without actually telling it to others. In this way, mathematics can really be amazing. Now we send this request to all of our contributors, which will check whether indeed the signature of the private key is valid and update their respective ledger. When this request is handled, it will be signaled and changed on the public ledger for everyone to see. Again, to repeat, this is overly simplifying and abstracting the process of changing the ledger. We didn't cover issues like trust, double spending, or synchronization of the ledgers. These problems are solved using the blockchain technology. This is outside of the scope for the video, but I will make another video explaining how blockchain works. When this video comes out, it will be put into the description of this video. Alright, now we have covered the ledger, what the ledger looks like, and how transactions take place. But a very important question pops up. Where do bitcoins come from? Do they just get created? Were they all created in the beginning? Do they still get created? Well, John, Bob, Chris didn't really magically have a number to that balance, right? And the answer to where bitcoins come from is the process that we just saw, verifying transactions. In the Bitcoin network, a code is written that people who contribute to the network get rewarded for it. All bitcoins in existence right now are gained by contributing to the Bitcoin network, which made it as big as it is today. Companies these days have thousands of computers running to contribute to the Bitcoin network. It's amazing. Going back to our example, let's say that John in the top left, contributed to the network by verifying his transaction. In return, he got fresh new Bitcoin as a reward. And for the sake of simplicity, let's say 1 Bitcoin in total. Now, what we see here is that his balance get updated to 1.5 on all ledgers publicly. This is a reward that he got for verifying the transactions. Alright, so now we know where Bitcoins come from, we know how transactions are made, and we know how the ledger works. So let's go a bit more into the coins. And this brings me to a nice wordplay. We're gonna talk about the Bitcoin economics. As we said, all Bitcoins historically in existence were rewarded to network contributors. At the moment of shooting these videos, there exists 18,639,487 Bitcoins in total. However, the rewarding of network contributors does have a limit. In the code of Bitcoin it's written that there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoins in existence. This means that 88.76% of all Bitcoins have already been created. At this moment in time, all the verifiers combined get rewarded 6.25 Bitcoins approximately every 10 minutes. This means that every 10 minutes, 6.25 new Bitcoins are put into the system. This reward that people get for verifying these transactions gets halved approximately every 4 years. In 2020, it was halved from 12.5 to 6.25, and in approximately 3 years, it will again be halved to 3.125 Bitcoins in total per 10 minutes. By halving the reward every 4 years, we can ensure that the 21 million Bitcoin limit will be maintained. Alright, hereby we finalize the explanation part of the video, and we will conclude with some comparisons between Bitcoin and banks, gold, and traditional currency. There obviously are advantages and disadvantages for using Bitcoin, but me personally as a Bitcoin enthusiast want to point out what I think, why I think Bitcoin is better than banks, gold, and traditional currency. If you're interested in my personal opinion, you're free to keep watching. If you are only interested in the non-technical explanation of Bitcoin, I want to thank you for watching this video and I hope you enjoyed it. Please share it with others if you want to non-technically tell them about Bitcoin as well. Alright, moving into the comparisons. Why is Bitcoin better than banks? Well, first of all, it's trustless. When we use banks, we have to trust them to manage our money well. In the past, we've seen that banks sometimes had troubles with this, violating many people's trust. Lots of people today don't trust their funds at banks anymore, but often they have no other option than actually to use them. And the point of trust brings me to the second point, which is the fact that Bitcoin is decentralized. What we mean by this is that your funds on the Bitcoin network are not managed by a central authority, like a central bank, but your funds are maintained by everyone. This means that not a single entity can tell you what you should do with your funds. There is no one that can freeze your account or not permit certain transactions. That really is the power of decentralization. The third point why Bitcoin is better than banks is because it's cheap to transfer Bitcoin. Banks often charge large fees for transferring money cross-country. Somehow administration costs are huge for these transactions. With Bitcoin, the transfer costs are low and they actually don't scale with the amount you transfer. This means that you can transfer millions or even billions of dollars worth in Bitcoin for as little as a few dollars in fee. The last point why Bitcoin is better than banks is because by using Bitcoin, you really own your Bitcoin. Using banks, you have a balance which represents how much money in the bank the bank still owes you, which is called an IOU. This means you are not in control of your own funds. And on the contrary, what we've often seen in the past is that if we get a so-called bank run, the banks don't have enough currency anymore to pay you out and have a risk to go bankrupt. With Bitcoin, you are the owner of your currency. No one can transfer or loan out your Bitcoins without your permission, without your private key. And this private key should only be known by you and no one else. And this makes Bitcoin really a unique currency. Alright, this is the part about the comparison between Bitcoin and banks. Let's move on to Bitcoin and gold. Why do I think Bitcoin is better than gold? Well, first let's discuss the similarity between gold and Bitcoin, which is that they are both scarce. Gold's value is based on a scarcity rather than its intrinsic value, and the same holds for Bitcoin. The advantage in scarcity that Bitcoin has is that for Bitcoin, the scarcity is known, while for gold, we don't know how much we will mine on a given day. And even for gold, we don't know the actual numbers of the amount of gold that exists in the world right now. It's kind of crazy. For Bitcoin, this is all public and can easily be checked. This means that the scarcity is known, so we can also put a better value on it. Further, Bitcoin is way more easy to transfer than gold. I mean, this speaks for itself. Gold is heavy and physically has to be moved from point A to point B. With Bitcoins, I can simply use the press of a button. I can send an amount of Bitcoins from the USA to China without having to travel there or to ship something there. These days, this sounds very trivial, but for an asset such as gold, this is not really possible. It really physically has to go to another place. Or you don't actually own the gold that you get, and you get a paper that says that you own gold, which is not the same. The last point why Bitcoin is better than gold is that it's easily divisible. Bitcoin is divisible up to 8 decimal points, which means that one Bitcoin can be split up into 100 million pieces. Gold on the other hand is hard to divide, since we have to exactly divide it based on weight. So this is a comparison between Bitcoin and gold. And at last, let's compare Bitcoin to traditional money. And for this, I have a bit of a different approach. So I want you to think about what money is in the first place. Why have we created money? Well, to answer that, we have to think about why did we create money? Why didn't we just use gold? Well, that brings me back to the last slide. Gold was scarce, which is good for the sake of money. And that's the reason why we use gold for trade in the first place. However, since gold was not easy to transfer or easily divisible, we invented modern currencies such as the dollar and the euro, which in the beginning were backed by gold, which means that a certain amount of dollars represented a certain amount of gold, and the banks actually had to hold gold to make dollars. This worked fine for a while until President Nixon in 1971 cancelled the golden standard, causing dollars not to be backed by gold anymore. This cancellation has effect on the scarcity of money, since now the Fed doesn't have to use gold and doesn't have to stack up gold, which is scarce, to print dollars. It can literally print unlimited amount of dollars. Hence the dollars, if you think about it, are not really scarce. In fact, they are the opposite, since we can just print as much as we want. Which brings me back to Bitcoin. Bitcoin really brings back money into the golden standard in its fundamentals already. Bitcoin is better than gold since it's easy to transfer and it's easily divisible. So really, if you think about it, why do we need our paper money still? If we have something that is scarce, easy to transfer, and easily divisible, while money is actually not scarce, however it's easy to transfer and easily divisible. So the reason why I think Bitcoin is better than traditional money is that it checks the marks of what we want from traditional money, namely being easy to transfer and easily divisible. But it has the perk that it's scarce, while our own money right now is not scarce. And that's the reason why I think Bitcoin is better than traditional money. Alright, you are an absolute legend if you've made it to the end of this video, since it has been a long while. Please leave a comment if you did, actually. It would be nice. Further, if you liked the video, please press the like button, subscribe to the channel, and I'm always open for questions in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video in the cryptocurrency explanation series.